All right, welcome back. This is a quick demonstration of how you will connect to VMware Lab Connect, your personal lab environment for while you are participating in this on-demand course. So in order to do lab number one, of course, you'll need to be able to log into your lab environment so that you can then log into our vCenter server and then start adding your ESX servers to the lab environment. So let's actually switch over. Basically, what you should have in your course materials is a link over to VMware Lab Connect, also known as the VMware Learning Platform. So let me switch over to that environment here. Give me 1 minute. Okay, so provided with the link that you have in your lab or in your course guide, you should have a link that takes you over to a page that looks something like this, where you'll be prompted to put in your username and password. If not done already, just make sure you use the same email address that you used to register for this course, and then you can log right in. And then you'll be provided with links over to enrolling in the actual learning platform for this course. So this is the Optimize and Scale class. You should be able to just simply enroll into the Optimize and Scale lab environment. Now, it will prompt me to start this exercise and start right in. Now, it may ask you for this to just verify, will this work well in your particular environment? So go ahead and run the test. It's actually a good check to see whether or not your browsers are set properly, maybe that you have the right lab network connection, bandwidth, and so on. And so this will show off whether or not you are, in an optimal environment for running this exercise. So it's just taking here a few minutes. There we go. Looks like I passed all my tests. That's good. So I can go ahead and ready to start the lab. So this may take a few minutes. Based on the average deploy time, this may take, about 9 minutes or so. So we're going to speed up the video here so that you don't have to wait this long, but just be prepared. What this is going to do is it's going to, in fact, get all of the lab environments ready to go, power on all the underlying servers. There's actually quite a few virtual machines that are used for this lab scenario. So give this a few moments to deploy. As we can see here, this is going to take some time. This is a time that we're going to speed up the video so that you're not going to be sitting here waiting for this to finish in 10 minutes. But be prepared to wait this long for when you deploy your lab. Okay, it finished up and our lab environment has been deployed. Check this out. So what we're seeing here, folks, this is the student desktop that you get when you log in to our lab environment here. And what you'll note here is it will provide us with several different areas in our lab environment. For instance, we've got our Firefox to provide access to the vSphere client. We have a notepad. We have over here, we've got basically a multi-tab PuTTY configuration. This is if you ever need to run an SSH connection with any of your ESXi hosts. This will show the different ESX servers. Double click on any one of these. For instance, double click on host number 1. And it's got its SSH services disabled. But if I go to host number 4, he's got SSH services enabled. And we can gain right into those hosts pretty quickly if we ever needed to gain access to the command line. That's the majority, right? We actually do have an RDC manager if you would ever need to RDP over to another Windows server. But the only other Windows server that I can think we have would be for the domain controller. Yeah, the domain controller, but also our certificate authority for our domain, which we'll use for certificate management. We shouldn't have to RDP over to it, but we can actually just browse to that system. What I'm really just showing you are that you have access to all these different systems in our lab environment, right? But most of the time, you'll just open up Firefox and we have bookmarks. Here are all the Site A systems. We've got our vSphere client for our vCenter server. This is our primary vCenter system. We have the vCenter Appliance Management Interface, sometimes known as the VAMI. Now it's actually just known as the vCenter Server Management. And so that basically connects to your vCenter server on port 5480. And then we have host clients for each of our different ESXi hosts. Over here under Site B, we have access to the vSphere client for that vCenter. So in fact, what you'll do in most of these exercises is you'll just log into your vCenter system through different tabs. Have one tab connected over to our vCenter system. This may actually take a few minutes since the vCenter server actually just got booted. So I'm thinking that the vCenter server is probably still waiting for a good amount of its services to finish starting. So while we're waiting for that, here's another important thing about our lab environment. Over here on the left is this consoles tab. And here we happen to have access to each of the different systems in our lab environment by consoling into them. So this is a quick and easy way if you ever have a situation where you've lost access to something maybe over the network. This is an easy way to be able to at least console into them and do some basic troubleshooting. For instance, our vCenter server is right here. If I open up this opens up a console into our vCenter server. You might have noticed that it was actually telling you that the vSphere client was still initializing. Well, you can actually log in here. One thing you want to make sure that you don't do, though, is try not to power down anything while you're in any of their consoles. You have access to them over here, but you're going to get yourself into more of a challenging situation. Okay, here we go. We've got our console back. Let me try F2 one more time here. There we go. Still, I think, coming online here, so it's just getting a few moments to gain access here. Here we go. By the way, passwords for everything are VMware 1 exclamation. So capital VM, WARE 1 exclamation. And hence, once you've logged in, you can check for a variety of different services. There we go. And for instance, if you need to enable the command line for your vCenter system, you can do that. I find you can probably do that much more efficiently by using SSH. So let me actually bounce back to the desktop here. And if you ever need to console into your vCenter system, it looks like all the services are actually up and running now. There's a good sign. But what I was getting at earlier is that if you were curious if all the services were running, what you'll do is just connect right into this system here, your VCSA. Once you've logged in, you can run this command, service-control status all. This will show you the status of all the different services on your vCenter system. It should indicate that all the services that need to be running are running. Any services that are disabled by default will show as being disabled. And as it shows here, most services are actually up and running. You can see here under running, we see all the services that are running. There are still some services that are still coming online. And then finally, some services that are stopped. But those services that are listed here are by default disabled anyway. So in any case, we find that the vCenter server is actually up and running here. If I log in as administrator at vSphere.local, we'll find our inventory on our day 0 implementation, right? Everything that the lab environment has been built for us. The first time you're logging into this environment may take a few moments. Everything has actually just been powered on. So then it takes a little time for everything to be established here. Once we have that up and in, we can do a quick look at the inventory. Okay. Looks like we got our environment up. Let's take a look at our inventory. It is showing that we have a cluster called SA Compute. It shows that there are 3 hosts. We've got a whole variety of different virtual machines that are a member of this cluster. We'll be using these set of systems for some of the different optimization exercises coming up later in the class. We're got a trust authority cluster. We'll be using that when we talk about the trust authority capabilities. In fact, we'll be using that in conjunction with the other vCenter server. Now, as you can tell, it's telling us that the host number 6 is not connected. I have a feeling it did not power on completely. Let's take a look at its console. So let's see here. Host number 6. What do we got? Okay, so it is reporting as being online. That's a good sign. So let's just try to reconnect. Go back to my desktop. Then we'll try to reconnect. Ooh, I think it's already connected. This is just the client not updating itself. So the client has updated and it's checking notifications. Let's try this again. Connection. Let's try reconnecting it from scratch. Because everything that we need to start off with should be here. So if the host is being marked as being in a weird state, it's always good to verify it's supposed to be here. So they're all supposed to be here. Let's give it a true connection here. Okay, it connected, no problem this time. Not quite sure what the problem was, but it should be connected. It is giving me a little bit of a flag, having probably something to do with the synchronization with the host and the vCenter system. But, we can deal with that. That's actually something that can be done. Probably over time, it's actually no longer giving me the error message. So this has probably been cleared as the host has now come online. What you might find more often, that's actually kind of unusual that a host is showing as being disconnected. It should have come up like that properly with all 3 hosts in their cluster. The cluster, though, might show with a yellow flag. And it tells me here, vSAN health alarms are suppressed. And that's normal. We actually will suppress several things. The vSAN environment in a nested environment like we have in our labs is actually not a supported way of running vSAN. So vSAN's going to complain about several different factors. One thing you might want to do, just to make sure whatever error messages you're seeing are new and maybe only apply to something that is happening in your actual lab exercises. What I would suggest doing is that when you first get this thing up and running, if you've got, say, some red flags, that's not a good thing. But if you've got these yellow flags and you're seeing that it's actually complaining about vSAN support, what you might want to do is click on the monitor tab. So click on the cluster, click on the monitor tab, and select Skyline Health. This is going to tell you about all the different things that primarily the cluster is, how it's been configured, and if it has any issues. So you'll notice here, the vSAN build recommendation, engine health. Well, actually, here, let me clear this out of here. By the way, we'll get into that here in a minute. The build recommendation, right? If I click on this, it'll tell me over here that I can silence the alert, right? Basically telling me that the release metadata is outdated. Well, this is a lab environment. It's going to become outdated pretty quickly. So I don't need to worry about it. It's not a good idea to do this in the production environment. You'd want to make sure that you've got the latest information about what the vSphere build is. This is part of that Skyline Health telling you whether your environment's been built appropriately. So let me silence that alert. And do the same over here, support insight. This is, again, we're in a lab environment, right? The actual platform is not supported because everything is nested. So let's silence that alert. One thing I like about these alerts, right? They can be told to be ignored. Not what you're going to do in the real world, but in our lab environment, these are things that you can do just to basically tell the system, stop telling me about the fact that you're not running on supported hardware. So most of these are going to be pretty much because of our labs. This one here, vSAN max component size, effectively they're telling us our actual vSAN storage is using very, very small disks, but that's okay. We're okay with that. Just tell the system that's okay. So having cleared all those, right, I can now do a retest and it will come back and tell me that, all right, now that you've told me, I've told vSAN and the whole cluster to stop telling me about unsupported configurations in our lab, right? They're all warnings, right? They weren't stopping us from doing anything. But that's a common thing that you'll end up having our nested environment complaining about nested and unsupported configurations. Once this comes back, it should tell us that everything is good. So we'll speed up the video here. So we have to wait for the whole thing to finish. Okay, it looks like we have passed all of our issues. All right, we told it to stop bothering you about unsupported configurations. So now, right, kind of telling me you're ignoring them now. Everything is all good and the system is happy. So why is that yellow flag still there? Well, we just got to do a refresh. Still a flag. So let's go back over here. And it says vSAN health alarms are suppressed. Yes, we know this. I'm going to reset that back to green. It may come back again, but just so that we know, this is all these little warnings were just about the fact that it was a nested environment, which is a non-supported platform for vSAN. Having done that, now we're ready to go with our first exercise. Just make sure, like I said before, check your licenses. Over here under the menu, select administration, select licenses, and just verify that the license keys that you have in your lab, they should be valid, right? These are good up until the end of 2022. So they should be good for some time. So we shouldn't have to replace any licenses. So what we should do, though, is go ahead and add our ESX servers to the inventory. We're not going to add them to the cluster, though. We're going to add the hosts to the data center, just 2 standalone hosts. So we're going to add 2 hosts. Again, everything has the same password. Our passwords are always capital VM, WARE, 1 exclamation. VMware 1 bang, as we always say it. It's going to ask about the license key. We'll go ahead and use the one we've got in our repository. No lockdown mode. And so while he's joining, let's add the other host. And that host is root, VMware 1 bang. And we'll go ahead and use the vSphere license key for that one as well. No lockdown mode. And we add that host to the inventory. So that's what you should find at the end of the first lab. At the end of lab 2, you will have added that distributed switch called DVS lab. But one thing you might have noticed in our lab environment, not only do we have access to the consoles to each of the different systems that you have in your lab, but also we have the lab manual. This is pretty cool. Right? So if you want to follow along with the lab exercise steps, instead of having to follow along in your actual ebook, you do have the steps right here, making it pretty easy to work with both the lab manual steps and also the lab environment directly. So this is an example of our lab environment. Works out pretty well. As I said, though, it's probably a good idea to have multiple tabs open for different purposes. The lab guide will actually tell you to log into both vCenter servers, so you have access to both at any point in time. It may log you out after some period of inactivity. Passwords are all the same, VMware 1 bang. And since these are linked in enhanced link mode, they're working with the same license keys. They should all be valid at this point. But this is the first time we've logged into this vCenter server. I think it's been up long enough that everything should be established here. And here we go. Right, so now we see, we're in link mode, so we actually see both vCenters anyway. But it's letting us know about that vCenter health alarm. Right, there's actually nothing going on with that vCenter system. There's only the one cluster. There's no vCenter over here. It's just a standard cluster. But the health alarm has been triggered. We can find out a little bit more about that detail under the issues here. Maybe reset it to green, right? Because you'll note if I go to, for instance, the Skyline Health, there's no vCenter here, so the Skyline Health is not going to be as extensive on this vCenter system. But it's letting me know that's my yellow flag. We have not enabled the Customer Experience Improvement Program, which is actually required for Skyline Health. So that's why he's probably not too happy about us there. So that's okay. We don't need it for this purpose. Plus, it's a lab environment. It'll be cleared at the end of your prescribed training period. So you can reset that to green to clear that alarm. And again, you can do everything all from one vCenter tab, but the lab exercise will tell you, okay, open up 2 different tabs, but you'll notice they're actually having you log into the same place. You're just authenticating against the different vCenter systems. In any case, that's the end of this demo. Go ahead and do your first lab to get your environment connected, get your host connected, and then in lab number 2, you'll go ahead and add your distributed switch to the environment. Once you're done with the lab, I'll see you again as we start lesson number 2.